The religion of Hinduism is a fascinating faith. There are Hindus that believe in one God, as amazing as that may sound, but there are also Hindus that believe in 330 million gods, others that believe the universe is God. How would a Christian think about Hinduism? How do we understand it? More importantly, how do we communicate the gospel to people who affirm such a different view of reality? To address that question, we're joined by Balajied Nongrum. He has training in science, in philosophy, and in theology. Balajied, my question for you is, how should we think about Hinduism? I mean, it strikes me that, is it one religion or is it a set of religions? How do we make sense of this religion that may have nearly 1 billion people in India that embrace it?
When you think of Hinduism, it's a very complex religion in itself. When you really look at it, basically it can be understood into two important categories or two important parts. One is what we would call as the classical view of Hinduism, where all is God and God is all. It comes from that worldview, that broad umbrella of Pantheism, which basically looks at the whole reality and says that everything, all that there is God. And who's God? God is all that you see. So I think that is the broad umbrella, the classical view, which Shankara would also promote and talk about in. The other view, the second category, is the popular Hinduism. Popular Hinduism would be close to what you've just described as a view of having 330 million gods. It is quite similar to the polytheist view of having many gods, which is quite similar to the Greeks' pantheons of God, where each household may have their own deity, their own idol that they would love to identify. So while you look at Hinduism at one hand, the classical view of being the philosophical view of saying that all is God and God is all, but on the other hand, on the popular Hinduism, you find while they would subscribe to that view of all is God and God is all, but on the popular Hinduism, you find that there is still that thirst that they have for relationship or for longing to relate with that idol. So each household may have a different idol.
What about what they call Bhakti Hinduism, where there is a devotion to a single deity? And I guess the follow-up to that is, are Hindus, do they care about working out how all of these different views can be logically acceptable?
Well, with regard to Bhakti devotion, or Bhakti Hinduism, each area or each culture in India, irrespective of whether it's a south or north or east or west, you'll find that there are specific idols that people identify with. And so you may not find the same to be true with all the others that you would find all across the country. So do they really work and try to make sense out of all of this? No, I think under the category of popular Hinduism is it is important that it just meets their desire of longing of relationship that they may not have it, but it is just relating with that idol. They best relate. It can be the goddess of wisdom, or for that matter, or any other. So it is just that devotion to that because they relate best according to what they feel, rather than the philosophical one of not being able to make any sense out of that. So I think that would be my response to that.
If people ask the same types of questions, whether they live in the East or the West, how would you suggest Christians reach out to people that live under this broad religious philosophical worldview we know as Hinduism?
One of the important things that I have learned from the study of the scripture is to emulate what Paul has so beautifully done, especially when he reached out to people from the other faiths. The classical example is Acts chapter 17, when he was reaching out to the Athenians. One of the important things that he said there was that he began with these important acknowledgments, saying that, by all means, I do recognize that you are religious. And so I think that is a very good starting point for us to begin with. Because as I said, irrespective of our, devotion, irrespective of our affiliation to any particular worldview, we all seem to be wired for the divine. And so I think it's a good starting point to begin with that acknowledgement that, there is that hunger, there is that thirst, even in that particular worldview or religious movement. That is number one. So number two, I think we also need to understand that central to this very worldview is the issue or the desire for atonement, a sacrifice. Because everywhere you go, you will find that the animal sacrifice is quite famous. Can't help but think of even the Kali Mandir in Kolkata.
Right.
That speaks of the animal sacrifice. Now, this goes back to the scriptures. You will find that there is embedded in the slokas or the scriptures that basically praise this prayer that says, I'm sinful in my thought, I'm sinful in my deed, and I'm sinful even in my nature. I was born in sin. Who will rescue me? Who will deliver me from darkness to light? Who will liberate me from bondage to freedom? Is that desire that they have. And that is the prayer. So at the end of the day, if you really look at that particular worldview, you will find that there are people who are longing at the end of the day, that issue of, how do I get my sins wiped out? How do I get my forgiveness of sins? And that is why you will notice that in different temples, one of the important things that they do during festivals is to go and offer offerings to God. And that can be fruits, that can be anything. So the symbol is that in offering that fruit, it is basically offering it with that deep sense of desire that somehow I have offended the divine being in some way or the other. And so in offering that, I'm praying that God would forgive me my sins. Even if they do not have the full, concept of sin develop in that worldview, but nevertheless, you see that hunger to get right with the divine.
Wow, very good.
And so I think that is very significant, that we bring and identify and see, explore ways of how we can bring the gospel and talk about Jesus Christ being that ultimate sacrifice, the lamb that was slaughtered, the lamb that was slain before the foundation. That would bring us forgiveness, and that would set a relationship right with God. So I think that is significant, and that is important for us to note.